Welcome to another Back in Time episode from HenRefurb. This episode I'm going to finish stripping and restoring all the rear axle components, so stay tuned. Right, I'm going to get stuck in straight away and start by stripping the crown wheel off the diff carrier unit. So there's lock tabs on all of these bolts, and I've just got to open all of those up so I can undo them. Go. This is a retaining pin which prevents that popping out, so I should be able to pop that out like so, and then all of this is supposed to just fall to bits. There we go. You just wind those two gears until you can take them out. One that side, one that side. There's that one. See that? That groove? That pulls oil out of the shaft and runs it into the back of the gear. Right, it's a new evening again. Tonight I'm going to start sorting out the axle body, so I'm going to finish off the welding, make sure there's no other holes or anything that he's sorting out, clean it all up, and then start preparing it for paint. So this is the patch here that needs all the work. Basically just going to take one of these wire wheels and just clean it back up because it's rusted a bit where I didn't put the rust proofing paint over it. Make sure it's as clean as it can be, and then I'll weld up all of these remaining little pits and things just to be sure that none of them are going to blow through. Then I'll dress them down with a flap disc on the grinder. It would appear the camera's fogged up again. There we go, that's better. Well, I'll tell you what, this stuff welds nicely and they blend in incredibly well. You can't tell the difference where this is blending from weld to cast metal at all. It's lovely. So all the deep pits are completely gone now. Oh, that was a properly messy job. Blooming grinding dust everywhere, but there's going to be more because that's where the chassis is, and I've got to cut and grind and weld the chassis anyway, so it's not a big problem. Can't do it outside because it's raining like crazy. but I'll show you what I've done. Alright, it's a bit shinier where I've been polishing it all with a wire wheel. Cleaned all of these faces, these as well, both sides. And in here, there were a load of bolts in these holes, so when I sandblasted it, underneath every bolt obviously didn't get sandblasted, so I've polished all of that up so it's nice and clean. And then smoothed off all of the burrs from the casting process, and which is interesting because even after I'd smoothed it off I was looking at this piece here and it was just a small black line, and I picked at the black line and managed to pick that lump out, and underneath that lump was a load of rust. So even once I've polished all these edges up and everything, there's still, you know, finding little things. I've been over it a few times and got rid of things like that. So there's no rust in there anymore, but hopefully there aren't any more of those sneaky little things hiding. You know, there's all sorts of little bits and bobs just sneaking around. I'm going to give this a bit of a clean and wipe down, and then start doing some body work on it. At long last, I'm going to be able to get that nut off because I've got the socket. It finally turned up. Not sure how much force this is going to require, so I'm putting this bar against one of the mounting holes, and then I'm going to drive against it with the torque wrench and see if it will come loose. I imagine it's going to take a bit of a tug. Oh, there we go. It's coming loose without even maxing out the torque wrench. Now we can find out what's inside. I don't think this will be tight, so I'm going to just try pulling it off with the little piddly puller. Now I can get to this and clean this up, which is the oil seal and housing, which is filthy. I'm just going to soak all of these bits in the parts washer now to get all the grime off so I can actually see what I'm working with. I'm just trying to get these bits off here so I can have a good look and understand how they go together. Well, that's not something I've ever seen before. So you can actually presumably take the pinion and pulley and everything completely out of the differential without adjusting anything, and then just bolt the whole thing back in. So the pinion had run right through the middle of this. Both the bearings are in here, one this side and one this side. And then this down here is just an empty housing that doesn't really do a lot now. So I've got the last bits of the differential pinion stuff out of the parts washer now. They've been soaking for a while. Good week I think now, just to soften all that thick grease up. So I'm just going to get these dried off and clean them up properly so that we can have a really good look at them and then it's a case of assessing exactly what's left to do on the back axle in terms of buying bearings and making gaskets and you name it, all of that, so that it can go back together. That's the cover plate with the oil seals in it. Not too bad, just a tiny bit of rough rust just along the edge there, so that'll just be, I'll probably just skim that and tart it up before I paint it. Nothing wrong with that. That's just the output flange, or rather the input flange. Nut washer, the shims for setting the preload on the bearings, and the spacer. And then here's the real thing. So this is the pinion where the bearing stood attached to it. All looks in really good condition. This is in remarkable condition apart from one tooth. Look at that. Anyway, I'm going to stick this in the lathe now and just tidy up a few edges on it just to make sure it's perfect, clean a few bits of paint off and polish the rust. I'm now going to have a quick go at getting the outer race out of the pinion carrier, because I need a part number off that to be able to know what to order. Oh. See, unlike the pinion itself, that's not going to take any effort whatsoever, that's almost falling out. There we go. I've been back to visit Dameron Garage again, thank you very much Dameron Garage, and they've got a hydraulic press down there and they helped me get the bearings off this shaft. So these ones I managed to get off, you saw on camera I think. These were extremely stuck, but we got there in the end. We did have to completely and utterly ruin the bearings, but they're going in the bin anyway because they're roasted, and this shaft is totally undamaged, which is good. That was the objective. Also managed to get that one bearing off the pinion as well, which is good, so been able to have a good look at the pinion and give it a proper clean up now. Time once again to get the slide hammer out and see if I can get this, which is the pinion seal from the differential. So hoping that, because this is completely worn out, basically there's normally a piece of leather over that spring-like thing you can see in there, so I've got to try and hook the spring out, and then I should be able to get my puller claws in and pull this out, and then I can work out what to replace it with. There we go. There it is. And there, so this that's now empty, and there's a felt seal down in the bottom, stuck behind that other seal. Okay, I've got hold of a load of gasket paper and cork gasket material, which is going to be used all over the place on this axle, and I want to actually make all of the gaskets now. So one big round one made of cork for the rear cover, and then a paper version of that round one which will be the differential side, and then basically a load this style approximately like that, which will be for all of the ends of the axles and the front of the pinion and things like that. I want to do the cork one first. What that means is I've got to try and remember which way round this all goes. So I think these are the underneath, so the axle's the right way up, brake fitting on the left, that was at the back. Basically it's the correct way up and the van faces that way. I'm looking at the rear end of the axle, so this gasket actually goes there. one perfectly matched bespoke cork gasket for Henry's Dodge axle. And Henry's Dodge axle alone, because it's so bespoke, it follows the contours of all the casting, overflow and whatnot. So yeah, that's really good. Good stuff. And I've got a load of leftover cork to do something with now. As it turns out, that gasket's a perfect fit for the other side as well, so I'm going to just make the paper one using the method just done this time round, because it'd be a lot easier than using the heavy old Pinion carrier, or rather the Differential. There's a paper version of basically the same thing. So next gasket, Pinion oil seal unit goes on the end of this. Need a gasket to go between them. Right, next up is to make a load very similar to this Pinion one, but for the axle. They're just a tiny bit smaller. First axle gasket done. Then there's just 3 more now, so I'll make 3 more and I'll see you when I've done them. And we are done. 2 big gaskets, loads of small gaskets. I'm gonna make a vague attempt at splitting this open, so you can see the line where they're joined. That hole there and that hole there are the original spot welds from 1930 that have been drilled out, and then that mark there and there are new welds that some previous owners had done a long time ago. I'm just going to do this a bit at a time. I don't want to go too mad and drill the holes too big or anything like that. I'm just going to burn through the top layer if I can, and then I'll see if I can prise it open and hopefully it will pop. And I'll just keep doing that, and then I'll keep increasing the drill size until it finally does come apart. I win. Oh, hang on a minute. When I've wobbled it a few times. Yeah, there we go. And that is back open for the second time in its life. So that's come apart without really doing much damage at all, apart from what was already there from before. I'm going to do what I can to clean this up, straighten it back up, and get rid of all the original holes that I've just created. See if I can make it look a little bit more like it's supposed to look. If you look right down in the pits, so on the tip of my finger, there, you see a little triangle. And there's one of those on every little risen part, and that's where I have just machined the tiniest little bit to make a modern SKF single lip oil seal fit. And that's a perfect fit in that hole now, as a result. And the outside ends up looking like that, so it looks really smart from the outside. And basically I'm going to weld all of these holes back up and then grind them flat just so it all looks pretty again, and then same on here, tart it all up. I don't think I'm going to bother welding these 2 plates back together, because obviously they're bolted onto the brake drum, or the axle, so they don't need to be welded together. And for future accessibility, it would be annoying, I think. So I have also made a little gasket here, which drops in there, like so. Then the oil seal drops on top of the gasket, and then this gasket drops there, and then that, when bolted together, locks the oil seal hard in place. So the oil seal is sealed with this front gasket here. The two plates are sealed together with this gasket, and then obviously there's a gasket that goes on the back between that and the axle. So that is a workable solution, and basically it's, 6 bolts, and you can just pop that oil seal out and replace it whenever it wears out. That one I'm going to leave as is because it looks fine, but in the future, if this starts failing, I'm going to do this conversion to it. I'm just going to give this piece here a quick sandblast so I can get some primer on it and then tidy up those edges. And then I'm going to get some primer on all of the bits of the back axle differential and all of that that's going to be painted. So again, I can see whether I need to just touch anything up to make it look a bit nicer. And then we'll be actually getting somewhere and a little bit closer to the reassembly stage. This has now been sandblasted. Obviously it had been sandblasted before when it was attached to the axle, but there were nuts and bolts and things all in it, and the plug, and so there were edges where I couldn't get to because of that, so I've re-sandblasted it again. The darker patches that you can see, it's just the rust proofing stuff I put on deep in the pits, so I didn't sandblast it too madly because there's no point, because that stuff's protecting it. So I'm just going to stick a coat of paint over this now, just a etch primer, and then I'll get a coat of thick primer on a bit later on. This part now, the essentially the differential carrier is all cleaned up. Just got to basically touch up a couple of little rough edges. It's got a few little dings or maybe cast marks or something that aren't very nice, and I'm just going to take those off with the Dremel. That's now smartened up around the edges, no sharp bits sticking out anywhere, so that'll help the paint stick. Right, well now it's time to get on with sorting this out. So obviously I did all the welding and I've started the body filler, but then I kind of abandoned it. And to tell you the truth, the chassis project got in the way basically, so I was getting that out the way, and now the chassis is actually done. I'm back on the axle, because obviously with the chassis finished I need the axle now, because that's how I get the thing back on wheels. Just about ready to stick some high build primer on all of the rear axle parts. You may have noticed the hat. It's 2 degrees outside, that's Celsius. For those of you who do Fahrenheit, 0 is freezing, 4 degrees is a refrigerator, 2 degrees halfway between. It's pretty cold. I'm going to paint them in the workshop just because the stuff, it doesn't really stick to anything. It might get dust everywhere, but I'm not really bothered about that. And it's just too cold to paint anywhere else, and I've managed to heat the workshop up to an almost sensible temperature, so here we go. Okay, so I stuck a load of body filler on the deeper pits and little notches where all the welding was originally here, just to get that up to level. It's another day, so this is dry and ready to sand down, and then I'm going to get some more primer over the top of all of the stuff you just saw me sand. Also, it's freezing. It's literally 0 degrees today. Everything is in primer now, all sorted, it looks great. So you've got the oil seal plate thing, cover plate, the pinion, flange, that's the differential body, and then obviously the axle tube. So all I've got to do now is fine sand it so it's nice and smooth, and then stick some black on. But you're going to have to wait until the next episode to see that. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you've got any questions or suggestions, pop them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.